All right, so we'll take care of some easy stuff first and look at how companies can actually do a distribution, a cash distribution. Well, like I already mentioned, there's two ways. We can either do a dividend or we can do a share repurchase, right? And so that's going to be our two kind of, like I said, opposing actions that we can pursue, or we can do both. A lot of companies do both. But, like, why is each one chosen? But the first thing we'll take care of is how dividends are actually, like, what legally has to be carried out for a dividend to be paid. Well, there's actually 4 different kind of dates that are important when we pay dividends. So you have your definitions here, and then I put in a little example from the textbook. All right, so you have what's called your declaration date, your holder of record date, your ex-dividend date, and the payment date. 2 of them are pretty straightforward, the declaration date and the payment date, right? They kind of tell you in the name what it is. The declaration date says is the date on which a firm's directors issue a statement declaring a dividend. Now, you should know that dividends are declared annually. So once a year, a company will come out and say, or in this example, it was November 21st for this company, the board is going to come out and say, hey, guys, we're going to pay X amount of dividend this year. So let's say they decide to pay declare a dividend of $2. That means that actually every quarter, you would get paid 50 cents per share, right? Which you're like, wow, I own 1 share of stock. I get a whole 50 cents deposited into my account every quarter. Yeah, I know. But that's how it actually happens in real life. So just like we always kind of assume that bonds pay out interest payments semi-annually, because that's how most bonds act in real life, dividends are declared annually but paid out quarterly. Good bonus question material. Hint, hint. All right. It says that on this date, the dollar value of the declared payment is reported as a liability in the balance sheet, right? Because we have said we're going to pay this. And the retained earnings account is reduced by that amount. So nothing really changes on the right-hand side of the balance sheet, because think about it. You're going to have your liabilities go up and your retained earnings go down by equal amounts, right? So you're kind of just like shifting money from retained earnings into a liability account, saying that, hey, these earnings that belong to the shareholders anyway, we're going to pay that to them in a few months. Not today, not on the declaration date. We've got to do all kind of things before then. We're not going to actually pay them until the payment date. So I'll skip down to that definition. It says the date on which a firm actually pays a cash dividend to those owning the stock, here's the weird part, 2 business days prior to the holder of record date. All right, so on the declaration date, they said, hey, look, January 10th next year, we're going to pay a dividend we're going to start paying a dividend of $2 per share annually. That's going to be our dividend for the year. Now, first of all, notice there's a big gap in time, right? We're talking about, was that like 50 days or so? Yeah. So almost 2 months between November 21st and January 10th. And both of those dates actually mean nothing in terms of who actually gets the dividend. To determine who actually, because think about it, how often can stock be sold, right? A stock could be sold 10 times in one day. We're talking about 50 days here. How many times could a stock change hands in that 50-day span? A lot, right? A lot of things can happen in 50 days. You should see my string of dolphins. It looks great from 50 days ago because it's in a very happy spot in my front yard. If you don't know what a string of dolphins is, go look it up. It's a succulent, a hanging succulent, and the little leaves that it puts out look like jumping dolphins. Yay. Anyways, yeah. So, holder of record date is our next important date. It says, if a company lists the stockholder as an owner on the holder of record date, then the stockholder receives the dividend. So on that day, I imagine, like in my head, this is how I visualize it. The company person goes and they open up like a ginormous book, like a registry, And they're like, I wonder who owns the stock today, because whoever owns the stock today is going to receive the dividend. Not today, right? Because here the holder of record date is December 20th, but whoever owns the stock on the holder of record date gets the dividend on January 10th that was declared on November 21st. But here's the thing. We used to not have computers. Shocker, I know. And so this was established long ago, before the convenience of electronic record keeping, that the company was like, well, how do I know the people on the books on the holder of record date are the right people? What if someone sold it the day before and I just don't know about it? I want to make sure the dividend goes to the right person. So they came up with the concept of an ex-dividend date, which for this company is going to be December 18th, which is 2 business days before the 20th. Now, the idea being is that you don't actually look at the holder of record date. You look at 2 business days prior, and you look at who was owning the stock before that day. And whoever owned the stock before the ex-dividend day actually gets the dividend. So I just lied to you about the holder of record day. It's actually the ex-dividend day, which is 2 days before the holder of record day, that you have to own the stock before the ex-dividend day to get the dividend. Why? Because back before computers, companies needed time to make sure that they had accurate records, basically. And that, if a stock was sold the day before the holder of record date, that they had time to record down the proper owner of the stock. So that's why the ex-dividend day was invented. Now, some students think that if you buy it on the ex-dividend day, you get it, like as long as you're owning it on the ex-dividend day. No, you have to be owning it before. It says 1 business day prior to the ex-dividend date, the owner of the stock at closing time on this day will receive the dividend payment. The way I always remember it is that on the ex-dividend day, you break up from the dividend. It becomes your ex. Huh? Right? It's like D-Day kind of thing. You are no longer together on the ex-dividend day. And so if you want that dividend, you better own the stock before it becomes your ex on the ex-dividend day. Official definition there, the date when the right to the dividend leaves the stock, which is 2 business days prior to the holder of record date. So if someone bought this stock on December 16th, let's say Bob buys it on the 16th, Bob gets the stock. If Bob bought it on December 17th, Bob still gets the stock. If Bob buys it on December 18th, which is the ex-dividend date, whoever sold Bob the stock gets the dividend. Bob does not get the dividend if he buys it on the ex-dividend date or any day after the ex-dividend date. Sorry, Bob, you have to wait until next year. And so that's how dividends are actually paid out in real life. And even though now we have electronic record keeping, of course, things are going to be processed the same day. The just norm of the 2 business days before the holder of record date is the ex-dividend date. And that's when this dividend leaves the stock. That has just been kept around, basically. Now, also you should note on that ex-dividend date, typically what happens is the stock price falls by the amount of the dividend. So like if a stock was selling for $32 before on the 17th, on the 18th when the dividend would leave the stock, it would sell for $30 because you no longer have the right to that $2 dividend that's going to be with the stock for the next year. So that's what you should know about actual dividend payment procedures when it comes to doing a cash dividend.